Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Defending Against Data Exfiltration, Critical Steps to Protecting Your Sensitive Data. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as your moderator. Thank you so much for joining us on the webinar. This event is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Rubrik. Now, before we get started, just a few things that you should know about the webinar. First off, we want this to be an educational event, of course. We encourage your questions there in the questions box, and we'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So keep your questions coming. We also encourage you to check out the handouts tab there in your audience console. It's there that you'll find links to Rubrik.com, as well as a special Rubrik landing page on how Rubrik can help you to recover from ransomware. And then finally, at the end of the webinar, we'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. If you're watching this on demand, of course, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms can be found there in the handouts tab. And so with that, it's now time to kick off today's presentation. I'm excited now to bring in and introduce you to our two expert presenters. Welcome, Mr. Matt Bisceglia, Security Account Executive, and Mr. Adam Turner, Senior Sales Engineer, both at Rubrik. Matt and Adam, it's great to have you on. I'll first hand it off to you, Matt. Take it away.
Great. Thanks, David. And good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. Adam and I are excited. We're here to share some of the really interesting ways that we can help not only protect your data, but provide additional insights from the Rubrik platform to determine what systems might have been involved in a ransomware attack, as well as what sensitive information you have in your environment and what potentially might have been exfiltrated in an attack. So we're going to dive a little deeper into the concept around how we can help defend your data against the exfiltration and the steps that we can put in place together to ensure that we reduce the potential of any sensitive information leaving your four walls. So that's what we have today. We have some slides. We'll get into a demo. We'll keep this as interactive as possible. Feel free to ping questions, and we'll answer them as best we can. So again, thanks all for joining. Let's jump into it. So really, where this all stems from is under the purview of ransomware, right? As we sadly are seeing these massive attacks occurring each week. I mean, last Friday, right before the 4th of July break here in the States, we heard of this rebel gang attacking over 200 companies. I think there was also a global impact to that as well. I believe the demands they have from a ransomware perspective are $70–80 million, somewhere in that range. It's insane, right? These things just aren't slowing down. So every organization from the board down, the executives are asking you folks that I'm sure have joined us today, hey, is our data safe? Do we have a plan to recover our data? If so, how quickly can we recover? Do we know what might have been exfiltrated? The concept of double extortion, where data is getting not only encrypted and deleted, but now data is leaving the network. Do we know what was impacted? And if so, what was, and what are the steps that we can take to avoid that from potentially happening? So we're seeing that we've built layers of security to protect ourselves, but the bad guys are breaking through all of that, getting to our data and leaving with it. And that's a terrible scenario. But sadly, that's what a lot of organizations are faced with today, is that they're going to get through. So from a Rubrik standpoint, while we can't help on the perimeter side or the network side, keeping the bad guys out, what we can do is ensure if a ransomware attack were to occur, let's hope that never happens to you folks, that we can protect your data, particularly the backup sets, from being impacted in the attack, so that you'll have the ability to actually recover the data. But then we can also take into account other steps to recover the data faster, know what specifically might have been impacted in the attack, and surgically only recover the affected files, systems, folders, etc. But also, as we're going to be talking more about today, what sensitive data might have been involved in the attack, and help understand what potentially might have been exposed and or exfiltrated, so that you can take further action from there. And ideally, be proactive with this approach. Clean up the files, folders, the virtual machines, your NAS environments, all the unstructured content, know what's out there, know who has access to it, and ensure that that data is either moved or deleted, or encrypted and further protected so that if you ever are attacked, sensitive data is not sitting out in the open. Somebody didn't take an extract of a SQL database and leave a bunch of patient records or credit card information, social security numbers sitting out there, it unencrypted, ready for the bad guys to take and exfiltrate. So that's really what we're going to be focusing on. And as we think through this whole concept of risk management and data management, it's a behemoth problem for all of us, really. And Rubrik's perspective is really to help. And the three things that we're really focusing on is trying to simplify understanding what sensitive data is in your unstructured content. There's a ton of data growth. We're seeing about a 2x clip of unstructured data over structured data. It's difficult to query unstructured data, know what it is, know where the sensitive data may be, and who has access to that. The other challenge is we just were talking about is ransomware is not slowing down. In fact, it's dramatically picking up. The sophistication of these attacks is only getting greater, and the demands are getting the ransom payments are being paid, and the ransoms are getting higher. Right, they're increasing on average about $1.1 million according to Sophos on average last year. So those ransomware demands are just increasing, and the attacks are increasing as well. And then there's the other challenge, which is we have all these new regulatory, and compliance regulations that we need to adhere to. It seems like every state here in the United States seems to be thinking about or releasing this new privacy law that is really piggybacking off the success of CCPA from California and the European Union's GDPR. So there's all these new privacy laws on top of everything else we've been dealing with. Like if you're healthcare, HIPAA, it's you live and breathe that, right? PCI DSS for people who might be processing credit cards. Audits are a real thing, and in the purview of ransomware, if we're thinking about our data being exfiltrated, now we're obviously breaching the compliance regulations here. Data, sensitive information, might be on the dark web now. So how do we further ensure that data hasn't leaked out of secure networks and in areas into an area where it's just unencrypted, sitting there ready to be taken? And so that's really the problem that Rubrik can help with at a high level. So hopefully that resonates with you folks and gives you a sense of the background of where we're coming from this perspective. From there, I want to get my partner in crime, Mr. Adam Turner, involved. Adam, my friend, why don't you help us understand a little bit more around how folks, what's out there, what's available for customers and for folks who might be thinking about this problem? What are some of the ways that they can help mitigate that risk? And what are the tools available to them today? Let's maybe start with manual tooling. What's that all about?
Yeah, so Matt, as you described, finding this data is the very first hurdle. Unstructured data is a behemoth. It is very, very tricky to corral it and understand the contents of it and where it may lay in the data center. So as we get into this landscape, trying to limit our security footprint for all things ransomware, out the gate, there is the opportunity to use some manual tooling. Generally speaking, this is some PowerShell or some Python running regular expressions. And while regular expressions are very powerful, it's a pretty heavy tool to wield with respect to accuracy. So you invariably generally end up with a good amount of false positives, as a social security number could look very, very similar to a customer number if we didn't have the right type of context to frame that search result. And as I mentioned, it's either going to be, this language or that language. So if you don't have great cross-platform support, you may find yourselves writing, two versions of code to implement the same type of process. So you start to get some configuration sprawl there as well. And then someone has to do this. This is why it's called manual tooling. A lot of these types of solutions don't exist in a turnkey manner if you were to search for, PowerShell, sensitive data discovery, things along those lines. It's going to be a little bit more generic. There's still going to have to be some specificity applied to what you may be able to get from the open source community to start getting something that you can leverage for the business here. So as I just mentioned, all of that sounds slow, right? This isn't a project that we can start and have it finished within probably a week or so span. We're probably looking at a multi-month effort. And then it's also just discovery. It doesn't really help us understanding who's doing what with the data, or maybe doesn't help us understand who even has the opportunity to. And then last but not least, it's really, really hard to build a really, really secure platform when you're kind of doing it as a side project. And whatever output comes from this manual tool, that is now sensitive information. So we have to be very, very, very hygienic and very accurate with how we're going to secure that data and make sure that it doesn't turn into a treasure map for a remote attacker.
Yeah, it's the last thing you want to do, right? Is just leave a gold mine for the bad guys just to take and exfiltrate all that hard work you just did, right? That's not a good day for anybody.
Right, right. And so, that's just the manual tooling opportunity. Naturally, there are some purpose-built solutions out there that can help us with e-discovery. Unfortunately, they come with just a few, not limitations, call it just rigidities to them as far as, what would it take to get your entire data center scanned? And what would be the supportability and the security of that type of solution in a ransomware event? So most of these solutions have all been developed to run on Windows, which unfortunately is, it is what it is with respects to its security posture. And most of them also leverage agents. So that's an additional expansion of the security footprint. And also, most organizations are not looking for, one more agent to run on their production systems, consuming production resources, et cetera. And while not a commonality across the board, at least with respects to the Gartner top right quadrant leader, we're usually looking at a per user license. So the ability may be vast, but the cost may be significant to really roll it out across an entire organization. To that point, it can be hard to scan everything when you have to consider that that is using all of your production resources to some percentage, because we're talking about putting an agent on every single system. Managing that agent, upgrading the agent, we're probably going to want to have some service account rotations. That's going to be pretty wide scale as well. And then, as I mentioned, inheriting Windows security, while something that we can throw effort at to get a Windows box locked down. I did that for about 5 years as a Navy contractor. It's not a super scalable thing, right? GPOs only go so far. We still have zero-day vulnerabilities out there, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the coverage of, well, if we wanted to surface all that data, what would it look like? What are some of the limitations to it? Now that we know where it is, this is when we can actually start talking about the critical steps to defending against data exfiltration. And that is, primarily going to be some type of DLP, something that has the ability to look at the data, look at where it's going, and then make a pass-fail decision on whether that action should be taken. It is very, very effective in modern day solutions. However, it's very, very restrictive. So if we wanted to say we won't invest in a solution that tells us our sensitive data, we'll just treat all the data as sensitive. We're most likely going to end up locking down the entire organization in a degree which is going to impact the business. It's going to limit the business's ability to perform, because the amount of checks and balances are just going to be kind of a non-starter. So while DLP is wonderful, we have to know how to apply it. We need to understand, where is the sensitive data, and then how do I apply it in a nice uniform manner. If without that, then we're basically going to be constantly dealing with help desk tickets, understanding I need to have this whitelisted, I need to have this approved, et cetera. And if we're talking about something that's going to be maybe a per device license, or if it's going to be a license at scale, depending on the size of systems or CPUs, et cetera, then that can be problematic too. So Rubrik Sonar is kind of the idea of, let's take all of these and lump them together and understand where are some shortcomings and where can we utilize something that the business is already investing in, backups, for the source and the execution of sensitive data discovery. So, Matt, if you can hop over to the next slide, or actually, I think I can too. Perfect. Thank you. So, what we start out with at Rubrik is what we call a unified metadata ledger called Polaris. This is a SaaS solution that allows us to aggregate all of the relevant stats and management controls that you would normally see on a data protection solution. So configure policies for backups, do live mounts, as we call it, or restores, etc. But also use these clusters resources to identify the sensitive information that lies within them. So GPS, as we're building this out, is our solution to actually just manage these clusters. And then we have our cyber resilience and data classification services to understand what's actually inside of the files that are being protected. So Rubrik is an incremental forever backup solution, meaning the first time that we take a backup, we're going to naturally transfer a either natural or lightly compressed version of the data over to our appliance, where we store it, encrypt it, massage it into a compressed, deduplicated form, etc. But the next time we take a backup, it's just going to be the change blocks that have to be sent over the wire and processed, which allows us to drastically reduce our backup windows, especially when we get around to the weekend or whenever we have to take another full. So because we have that incremental forever backup solution, that enabled us to have an incremental forever e-discovery solution, or sensitive data discovery solution, if you will. So from there, we take a backup of a system, we look at the human readable files that are on that system, and then we scan those files for things like social security numbers, PII, etc. And the way that we do that is naturally we're going to use some regular expressions. We also have the opportunity to get almost like the Google feel with it and just search for something like a dictionary search term. But we're also going to wrap those results around some additional checks and balances. We're going to use algorithms where we can to determine something as specific as a social security number. There are some algorithms for certain classifications that help us validate it, nice and quickly. We're also going to apply some natural language processing to the scan results. Just so a quick example, if we're looking for a phone number, then before that we may have the text phone, or PH. Or if it's a credit card number, maybe we would expect Visa, Amex, Discover, et cetera, and then CVV or et cetera type of pieces before and after that match. And this is what helps us drastically reduce the false positives that we have. And just as one quick reminder, we don't have agents for this. There's no additional external reliances for us to be able to scan this data. We're just using the cluster resources that we have. Our zero trust architecture with an immutable file system that's logically air-gapped ensures that while we're generating all of this sensitive data, it's staying on a hardened solution. So it's not something that is easy to access if we do have an insider threat. So finding all this data helps us prepare for a ransomware attack, so we at least know where we need to focus our efforts with respect to sensitive data being exfiltrated. The way that we help out with DLP is we can understand right out the gate what's the security posture file by file for anything that does have sensitive data inside of it. So if you have a highly dense file with tons of sensitive information in it, or even just a few, then we can understand, does it have access from domain users, from the everyone group, the authenticated users group? These are automatic opportunities for us to go ahead and reduce the security footprint of these files. We always want to have the limited amount of users that we can on these files and folders that contain them, so that if we do have an insider threat, they can't just start out with default access and a default set of credentials to get to our most sensitive data. We're going to want to provide a very, very high level of effort for them to access that data, being compromising one or two or three highly restricted, highly monitored accounts, so that we know, again, where do we focus all of our most stringent security protocols, either on a file or folder or system on a system basis. And then last but not least, once we get all this information to you and we provide the security teams opportunities to go enact change, we can also make sure that we can keep up as the data is forever growing. So if you have systems that are automatically being backed up by Rubrik, perfect. We can automatically scan them by using Rubrik Sonar. If we have systems that come online, the appliance has a few bit of automations built into it that allows us to see, hey, we got a new VM. I'm supposed to protect everything in this folder or this cluster. Okay, let's protect it. We can enable the solution to automatically start scanning it for sensitive data too. And what I'm kind of alluding at to here is that we don't have any scale limitations. Because we're borrowing the spare resources that have already been built into the appliance, then we're always going to have an expected ratio of data to the system resources that are in these appliances. So we will always have enough. We will always have enough resources to scan the data as it's going in. And naturally, if we need a bigger cluster because we've had more data, it's a scale out solution. We just add nodes or add clusters, or I'm sorry, appliances. Either way, to get the scale out, and we'll always have additional resources to handle things like the sonar sensitive data discovery.
That's great.
So let's move on real quick to just the user experience here. So naturally, we have a dashboard that is dedicated to the Sonar platform. So if we were to get an alert, then we would log into here and maybe go see what's the new system that has sensitive data on it. But we are very sensitive to the concept of console fatigue amongst security administrators. Generally speaking, we have multiple tools to accomplish any given task. So if we have a vulnerability analysis project, we're probably not going to lean on one tool, probably going to have a few and have some overlap for additional results. And so as that kind of theory or paradigm continues on, then we've just got tools everywhere, and getting them aggregated into a central console can be somewhat tricky. We've partnered with Palo Alto to work with their XOR platform to send in information from our Sonar product as well as our Radar product, which helps us understand at a file level which systems are being impacted by ransomware by detecting their encryption, and sending this data into a common platform where administrators can work together and even implement some automated tasks, such as isolating a system on the network, locking down any Active Directory accounts that may be identified as compromised, et cetera. Some really powerful integration to pull a lot of these tools together and keep the administrators focused on one platform. So we just wanted to refresh real quick again on the architectural advantage that we have here. So sensitive data grows, right? It never really gets smaller. Same thing for unstructured data. Your structured data is always going to grow. Your unstructured data is going to grow even faster, as Matt was alluding to. And invariably, there's going to be more sensitive data that's going to encompass these files. So as we have more data, we need more resources to scan it. And as you would expect in the majority of solutions that are around in infrastructure these days, we may have to deploy multiple servers to handle multiple roles at scale. We may have to handle multiple servers that do the same thing and come up with a load balancing solution. This turns into another hurdle that we're going to have to clear with respect to single point of failures. And then, what's going to be the back end for this? Probably an MS SQL database or something else that's going to require additional attention to secure and lock down and limit access. The licensing can be problematic. If you want one specific solution, you may be kind of hamstrung and forced into buying a more bundled type solution just to get the one piece that you want. And then scripts to backfill any missed opportunities or to stitch together some of these solutions. So because we already have an appliance that has a scale out software running on top of a scale out hardware platform, we're able to just take advantage of the data that we have and the mappings that we have of that data and which systems it comes from or they came from, and then just apply policies to individual objects, whether they be VMs or large chunks of files, to identify the sensitive information. We don't have to reach outside and deploy agents. We don't have to leverage ESXi resources or individual physical resources. The only thing that we would need outside of the appliance is just an understanding of the custom users that you would have in AD. Most of our appliances are already set up for AD single sign-on and multi-factor authentication, which we bring to our customers free if they don't already have a solution. So we, again, can just leverage the natural stance, if you will, of a Rubrik cluster. We just flip the switch to turn the solution on. will automatically identify all the objects that are already being protected, and then we can apply pre-built policies for CCPA, PBLA, US Financials, PII, HIPAA. We have pre-built policies to handle the majority of all requests, and naturally you can build custom policies and custom regex patterns or dictionary searches to look for things that are most important to your organization. It's got one slide ahead there. So in summary, we automate the data classification requirements that organizations have today in a seamless manner that requires zero professional services, zero real administrative resources that are needed with respects to training, having to undergo any type of certifications. This is designed to be a very SaaS, self-service type of solution. And we, on top of understanding where the data is, we help understand who has access to it. And coming up in a future release, when I say future, I mean the end of this month, we're going to start understanding who is actually accessing the data by analyzing the logs on the systems that we're backing up to see who is normal and who is abnormal for a file that contains sensitive data and the rate of which they access it. So we're going to switch gears real quick into a demo just to give you guys a little look and feel. And then we'll pass it back to Matt for a few case studies and we'll do some Q&A. So let me get my window shared. Okay, perfect. So we are staring at the Sonar dashboard. Naturally, we're going to give you a quick total review of how many sensitive hits we have found. So this would be any unique social security number, HIPAA record, et cetera, right? Just all at one glance. And then below, we have the opportunity to break those down into how many hits are in a file that has open access, the total amount of files that actually have sensitive hits, just from a quick file view or layer of the environment. And then we can also understand how many haven't been accessed within the last year. But before we dive into all of this, the most impressive to me, and I think one of the most valuable pieces about Sonar, is exactly how easy it is to turn on and set up. So this dashboard is made available to our customers simply by just purchasing the licensing. At that point, Sonar is on. All we have to do to get started is we just come up here to the Management tab. Here we have a bunch of policies that we have out the gate. If we'd like to create a new one, we can do that under the Configure Policies workflow. So let's go and check that out. So here we have our pre-built policies that we can use to move forward. If we do have the need to create some additional set of requirements that we're interested in, we can just create a new policy here. And the policies are constructed of analyzers. And we can see that we do have the concept predefined and custom. And what these analyzers really are, it's just a simple title and then a regular expression that is used to identify certain information. And then we'll give you the opportunity to put some sample text in and validate that. And we have the dictionary approach as well. So if we don't have a really clean way of doing a regex pattern, maybe something like a street address that's a little too variable, then we can try for the dictionary approach. If we do have something that's a little bit easier formatted, then we can try a custom, if you will, regular expression that's designed to filter out some of the noise. But if we seem to be set with the policies that we have, we'll just hit back here, select the ones that are interesting. This guy here is actually a custom policy, so we'll hit him as well. Then we hit next, and we're going to get a listing of all of the objects that are backed up across all of my clusters in the entire world. So if I did want to focus on a specific cluster, I can come down here, maybe select this one. And then we have all of the objects that are on this particular system. And if I wanted to focus in on something like a Nutanix virtual machine, then I just click that filter and move forward. We do cover vSphere as well. We cover Hyper-V. This isn't any type of specific hypervisor or specific or segregated solution. It's completely agnostic of the three hypervisors that we support, and we can also do Linux file sets. We could even do AIX or a large Isilon or NetApp, really anything that is supported by just looking at individual files, backing up those files and scanning them. So the opportunities there should cover all of our unstructured data sources. So we select policies, we select objects, we hit next, and we're done. And that's it. And if we wanted to, we can certainly go through and apply all of our policies to all of our objects or break the objects into groups based on our expected results for those scan results. So we'll imagine that I hit configure here to go kick off that scan. But for now, we'll go and look at some of our existing scan results. So we come over here to objects, and we're going to get a listing of everything that's been configured with a policy so far. And out the gate, we're going to sort by sensitive hits so we can understand which systems are, if you will, the most valuable targets for a ransomware attacker based on the amount of information that's inside of them. We do have the opportunity to quickly look at the breakdown on a policy by policy approach for this particular system. A quick indication of any change to us reducing sensitive information is good, so that's marked as green for the two systems below that have reduced amount of sensitive data inside of them. But maybe most importantly, when it comes to ransomware and the risk of data exfiltration is going to be the risk of these systems. And we're going to define risk as any object that has at least one file containing at least one sensitive hit inside of it. So to go and check that out, we'll just drill in here on our object. And we'll allow you to walk the file system if you want to see maybe which folder has the most roll-up of sensitive information inside of it. In this case, we're interested in looking at the actual files that have that open access permission. So we can see there's at least one in the C drive, so we can switch a little bit faster just by sorting on the files themselves. So here we have it ranked by the sensitive hits, and then we can apply one more filter to look for sensitive hits with open access, and here is our individual result. So we click on the credit report file here to bring up its properties. We get a quick understanding of the classification metrics. So we are looking at a SaaS UI right now, meaning that this is cloud hosted. However, the sensitive data itself that is contained inside of this PDF and including the PDF itself always stays on the appliance. The only things that we're looking at here is just the metrics with respect to how many hits the CCPA policy generated versus the US financials, et cetera. And we can understand the security posture of the file here under the users tab. So we can see who the owner is, and then we can see all of the permissions that have been applied, either through an inherited configuration or through explicit. So without that icon, we know it's an explicit permission, which means that this domain users configuration is explicit. So wouldn't really matter where we moved it around the file system. It's never going to gain some security controls that would make it more secure by inheritance and things like that. This permission is effectively tattooed on this file until someone manually comes and reconfigures the file, changes the permissions. And now we would also have the opportunity to further it even more. Having the administrators group, may be fine, but that's also going to be a pretty common target for credential compromise. We may want to have an even more limited set of users that are administrators of this data, but maybe not of the files themselves, right? It's up to the individual organization, but having a ledger of which files are both sensitive and at least are defaultly open access with, again, domain users, authenticated users, the everyone group. That's a real easy, quick win for us to limit that data. So again, the idea as far as how Sonar helps with the concept of defending against data exfiltration is while we're not an edge perimeter DLP solution, we do believe we have the scale and the data already in our grasp to be able to identify all the data, report it back to you, allow you to corral and get all of the data into as few sources as possible, and then lock down those sources as tight as you effectively can with your DLP solutions. So I'm going to hit stop sharing here 1 second, and Matt, we'll take a look at the remaining slides.
Great. Good job, Adam. Hopefully that was really quick overview, but a great one, I think, for everybody on the phone. I thought Adam did a great job of just summarizing it for you and showing you how quickly you can set up these jobs to scan for not only sensitive information, PII, PHI, but also understand who has access to this information, right? And potentially identify not only where there's areas for ransomware attacks to occur against your sensitive information, but even internal bad actors, right? Maybe somebody who's leaving the organization and taking a bunch of PII with them. And to know what that is of importance. And taking, what did that take? 5-10 minutes to set up, and you're done. So pretty straightforward. Hopefully that was clear to everybody. So I wanted to share a story. This is a story about a Rubrik customer who last year was attacked with ransomware. It was actually a maze ransomware attack. There's obviously a lot of different types of bad actors out there, and the efforts that they do or that they take to get access to your information, whether they encrypt, delete it, and or exfiltrate it. In this case, it was double extortion, where they encrypted and deleted the data in the production systems and then exfiltrated it. And luckily, they had Rubrik for almost all of their data sets they were protecting. All the data that was impacted with Rubrik, they were able to get back within less than 24 hours. They were able to also identify what systems that were being protected with Rubrik were impacted by the ransomware. So it ended up being about 200 virtual machines that the bad guys got access to. And they also used sonar, this capability that Adam had just walked through, to identify what sensitive information was on those 200 VMs. And they did that after the attack. We had just talked to this organization who was, again, a Rubrik customer about sonar, and they were interested in testing it. And then soon after we talked to them, no coincidence, they got, it just happened to be a coincidence, they were attacked, right? And so luckily, as I mentioned, they had Rubrik, they were able to recover the data, and they said, hey, you just showed us sonar. We really need a version of this. Could you help us? And we obviously obliged, as being good partners to them, said, absolutely, like, let's help you dig out of this hole and get you back to business. So they ran the sonar tool against the backup data. We have the benefit of the version. So what we did was able to go back in time and look at, we knew the VMs that were impacted. We knew the time that they were impacted. So we ran sonar to say, hey, we have 30 days of backups we can pull from. Let's go back and look at that point in time and figure out what was on those systems and what potentially might have been exfiltrated and exposed. And so we were able to do that. And what we found was there are actually, sadly, all the parents' credit card information was taken outside of the PCI secure SQL Server environment as an extract, moved into a VM. A developer just did it to test some code, left it there, didn't delete it, and that was part of the exfiltration that the bad guys took, right? They took that information and leaked that to the dark web. So that's what the bad guys started with. So all the parents now have their credit cards, their billing information. Some had social security numbers, other PI and PII that was identified in the attack. The other thing that they took that was of concern was special education students, their health records. So PHI was also part of this attack. That was also leaked. And what's amazing about with sonar, we enabled it in their environment, ran the scans, completed the scans prior to the forensics team and the FBI team coming in and doing their own analysis. We were able to figure this all out, hand that report to those individuals. They conferred that with their own tools that, yes, this is what was done, this is what was taken. And we were able to do that, and within 24 hours. The beauty of this is this, again, it's so easy to get going. And we can look at everything that you're backing up. So the surface area is massive to catch those things that might have slipped out of the secure network or the secure environment that you might expect it to be in. And after talking to the CISO, she shared with us, we wish we had done this earlier. We wish we had taken this proactive approach to determine what was truly out there so that we could clean that up. Because if we had, the bad guys wouldn't have gotten access to that stuff. We would have caught it and deleted it or moved it or encrypted it. So that's really the story here, is that there's that proactive measure that you can take with Rubrik to see what's out there, fix it, and then, God forbid, an attack occurs, at least you know that you've taken steps to reduce the amount of data that might be sitting out there, and reduce that threat of data exfiltration of sensitive information to your brand, which can damage your brand and potentially damage your organization in significant ways. So again, I think that's a given. But these are just some real world examples, and sadly, there's been so many of these where Rubrik's helped companies dig themselves out of these scenarios. We don't like to see it, obviously, but it's good to know that from a Rubrik perspective, we can help, right? We really can help you in a time of need, not only to recover your data, but ideally get ahead of it and be proactive with it with things like Sonar and identify what's out there. So just a couple, that was just one of many stories, and hopefully that resonates with you all. From that perspective, I think that's the content that we had prepared for you folks. I know we get about 15 minutes left of the allotted time. I think, David, I'll turn it over to you and we can maybe take some questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. We do have some questions coming in from the audience. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about the Rubrik solution that you just learned about and saw here on the webinar today? And note that this is a multi-select question. So, feel free to select more than one option on there. Let's see. First question that came in. This one's from George. He's asking, how do we counter the argument that encrypting the sensitive data is protection enough without adding additional investment? Matt or Adam, who wants to take that?
Yeah, I guess I could start. Adam, you can clean up my answer. But I'd say the beauty of our approach here, right, is that we're going to find sensitive information that is not encrypted, right? So data that might be where it shouldn't. In other words, the unknown unknowns is how some customers have described it to us. I know that I have, let's take credit cards as an example. I process credit cards for payments. I need to be PCI DSS compliant, and obviously want to make sure that that data doesn't leak or get exposed. So I know that I keep my credit cards here. Maybe it's in a SQL Server environment, it's secure, and I know it's there. What happens if somebody by accident took an extract or moved that data and left it out in an environment where it is not encrypted and it's sitting there ready, right for the taking? That's the type of stuff that Sonar will identify, that Rubrik can help get ahead of and ensure that that PII is encrypted, it's moved, it's deleted, what have you. We can also go further and look at that and say, who has access to this, right? Do the right people have access to this information? Is it global access or open access, so everybody in the organization has access to this data? If so, we might want to whack the apples, change it, do what you need to. But I think encrypting the data is really the first step to ensure it's protected, and it's looking for the data that is outside of that is really just not encrypted and not protected, that you want to find and capture before the bad guys get to it. I don't know, Adam, if you have another perspective to add there, or something else to another thought maybe to answer that question.
Yeah, my thoughts are kind of along those lines. If we have the opportunity to encrypt our sensitive data, and doing that comes with zero side effects with respect to the need to access that data. If we have a team of people that need to access encrypted data, do we give them private keys, or we're going to be doing asymmetric cryptography here? How do we access the data, right? Like generally there are some day-to-day living problems that can come along with encrypting our data. So it's definitely what we want to do, but it's not as easy as just doing it. So as we do mature as organizations into being able to do that and having a nice balance of the confidentiality and the availability of the data, we're likely still adding sensitive data in places that are either not known about with respects to shadow IT or shadow users, or just new projects, new landing zones for data. So if we can find our sensitive data and we can encrypt it using results like Sonar, that's wonderful. But within a few months, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, we're most likely going to have brand new unsensitive data that we didn't know about. And being able to use the power of Sonar to identify all sensitive data that lives everywhere in our data center will help us keep up with that hygiene that we're trying to achieve through encrypting every file that does contain sensitive information.
Yeah, excellent answer. Thank you so much for clarifying that. That's a good question. Next question, before we ask that, I want to remind everyone, of course, about the poll and also about our best question prize that we're running today as well. So get your question in now if you got something on your mind. Let's see. This one here, they're asking if you have any thoughts on the main challenges in implementing this solution for a medium sized financial institution. They say, since we have regulatory requirements on how to handle sensitive data.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for that. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
after you, my friend. I think you got there
Uh,
first.
yeah, so my thoughts there is that it's kind of one of the main value points of Sonar is that there's no configuration required. All of the elements that are needed for Sonar to perform would be pre-existing by way of procuring Rubrik, standing it up, which is usually a one-day task to get the appliance up and running, connected to your data sources, and already have the first backup completed. So with all that already at our disposal to start scanning the data, it's really just an understanding of what are your requirements. If our pre-built policies, the analyzers that comprise them, a very specific type of GLBA, like a banking routing number. If we know what our core requirements are, then we just select the policies, we apply it to the entire data center, and live off of the results. As we are report based, so we'll send out reports that'll have a CSV of the system, the policy hits broken down, and which files are containing the sensitive hits. And then from there, we can work with our security teams or our compliance auditors to understand what's going to be the best way to handle this information. Just to circle back, we don't necessarily have any kind of complications or problems with respects to the organizations that have the most amounts of data, being financial and healthcare related. We back up the systems, we scan the systems, we index the files, we index the contents of the files. So we really just kind of get to leverage the solution that we already built for backups to understand, where sensitive data lies inside of the backups.
Got it. Okay, excellent. And then here's another interesting question. Jeremy's asking if they want to use Sonar and Radar, is kind of the first step to implement Rubrik to protect the data?
Yes. So the one of the main beliefs and originating reasons why we built Rubrik was because backups should be better, but organizations should be able to get more out of their backups than just a fast restore. So we wanted to build a solution that is a leading vendor for data protection. We're in the top right quadrant of the Gartner Magic Quadrant for data protection, all the way to the right as far as the innovation side of the house goes. So we are trying to be the best data protection solution that is available. And then we want to be able to provide these type of solutions on the data and the horsepower that is already sitting there waiting to be realized.
Excellent. And then here's another question. Bradford's asking, what does it take, essentially, if I were to summarize here, what does it take to manage this Rubrik data protection solution that we're talking about today? What's the manageability like in terms of everyday tasks that would be required?
Sure. So all of our solutions are designed once we get everything up and running, any kind of irons wrinkled out, we should be able to live off of reports. So our data protection solution is policy based and has automation built into it to understand how many backups can I safely achieve at once without disturbing the production environment, and also when to take these backups, and is completely agnostic to the types of sources as well. So if you have one requirement for data protection, you have one policy that can govern the backups, the archive, the replication, all of the knobs and decisions that you may be used to micromanaging. It's a totally policy-based system, so it's going to handle the backups for you. And at that point, you'll just be able to live off of emails that have reports on any successes and any failures. And if there are any failures, that'll be a one-off email to you, which you can just simply slide over to support, and they can start doing all of the initial triage for us. So it's designed to be a very, very easy self-service solution with respects to just getting the backups. And then once we have the backups underway, we use Sonar to just map the policies that are important to either individual or all of the objects that we're already backing up. And then we'll generate reports that contain CSVs with a list of which files have at least one sensitive hit on a given system, so that you can start using just the reports themselves for the data that is being generated. Of course, you can still log into the user interface and manage an IT solution how you're traditionally used to by accessing a console, but we're trying to at least limit the requirements to do that by having a system that is very easy to stand up, auto protects and auto scans systems as they come on if you would like us to. And at that point, we're just getting the data that we need to, and we can start moving forward with the project.
Yeah, I love that. Easy to manage, policy driven, automatic. We need more solutions like that in the world of IT. Next question here. They're asking, how long does it typically take to scan?
Great question. So obviously going to be a little variable depending on the object, but what we generally see is that the first scan is going to occur somewhere in the order of hours. If it takes 2 hours to back it up, it's probably going to take us, roughly an hour, hour and change, maybe a little bit longer to scan it. Once we get to the incremental phase, we're generally looking in 13 minutes, 16 minutes. Again, it just depends on the size of the data that's coming in the door. But this is a very fast solution with respects to we're never going to be waiting days for results to catch up. Once we get through the initial tidal wave of data that comes into the platform, all our scans are going to be the results will surface in the Sonar UI within call it rough and tough about 30 minutes of the backup.
Very nice. Another question here, they say, I'm a Rubrik customer today. Is there a way to test this capability?
Definitely. It's one of the best things about getting this solution in the hands of our customers is once we demonstrate it to them, if there is a desire to get a look and feel of it, again, you already have a cluster. Generally speaking, you'll have a Polaris tenant that we can use to just flip the switch, turn the solution on, and then we'll identify a few systems that would be interesting to scan against to get some initial results, and then move on. And you can work with your Rubrik core account teams as far as getting someone like myself or Matt on the phone or Zoom, as invariably may be, to discuss what would that kind of project look like. But very, very, very easy. Very low drag. Usually 4 or 5 days. You've kind of seen everything that there is to offer, and hopefully come away with a great experience.
Very nice. And then Jeremy's asking here, is there any, how can this help them to prevent data from being exfiltrated?
Great question, because as we've mentioned, we're not DLP, and if you're trying to understand how can you prevent data exfiltration most effectively, that's going to be DLP. If we have the right resources, then it can be, maybe not a monumental task to take your DLP solution and appropriately tune it all across the data center, allowing users to do what they need to do without being completely hamstrung by our security products. That doesn't seem to be the reality for a lot of the organizations that we have as Rubrik customers. They see Rubrik as a great solution for having a very core team of administrators covering multiple tasks, and by being able to understand where do they need to focus their DLP solutions to have the most stringent set of requirements, such as nothing from this server is allowed to leave the organization, nothing from this server is allowed to leave the subnet, et cetera, right? How stringent do you want to create your DLP policies? We provide customers with an understanding of where is the information to start with, and then from there we can centralize our data, migrate it, relocate it, whatever we need to do to make sure that it's all in the right compartments that it should be, and then apply DLP to that compartment, as well as other solutions that we may be using to really focus on the most critical information with respects to security.
Yeah, I like that. I know a lot of companies out there struggle to, they know they need to protect their crown jewels, the company's data, but they don't know always exactly where those jewels are. So it sounds like this could really help them out to identify exactly where they need to focus their efforts.
Yeah,
Another
and
question.
the real
Go ahead.
sorry, I was going to have a one follow on the thing for me the real takeaway there is identifying the information is the hardest problem. It's either going to have a lot of false positives. We use manual tooling, or using some of the other solutions that are on the market. We may be priced out of them, or we may be limited in the ability for us to really deploy it at full scale. So, Sonar is a SaaS based solution that is designed to surface that information in a very accurate, very easy way that is also relatively affordable when we're talking about this particular market of IT.
Excellent. Next question here. Do you have a way to find credit cards in my environment? They say we are PCI DSS compliant, but we want to make sure we found all the credit cards that might have crept out of the PCI environment.
Yes, so we have policies that are pre-built that look for credit card numbers. Again, applying natural language processing to those results to make sure that the thing that sort of looks like a credit card number really is actually a credit card number by analyzing the English before and after it. And we can apply that to all of our VMs, all of our file servers, anything along those lines. This does come up, so I'll go ahead and address it. We don't cover databases today simply because there's a very robust set of tools out there to ask databases what's inside of them, identify that information. It is something that we're looking at, but today we're focused on the type of data where there isn't a common set of tools to analyze it, that being our unstructured data.
Excellent. Well, it looks like we're running out of questions here, and we're running out of time in the event today, which is a great stopping point probably for us to wrap up. Matt and Adam, it's been really great having you on the event today. I love seeing the Rubrik solution in action. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely. And thank you to our audience out there for joining us on the webinar today. Don't forget about the poll question there on your screen. We appreciate your feedback. Also, don't forget about the handouts tab there. There's a link to Rubrik.com and also a link to the Rubrik ransomware recovery homepage for more information on how Rubrik can help to protect your organization's data, identify the most critical and sensitive information, and rapidly recover should you need to do so. So I also want to announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. This is going out to Melvina Johnson from Maryland. Congratulations. And we'll also be contacting our best question prize winner as well. Thank you to everyone who joined us on the webinar today. I hope that you learned a lot and have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.